Good evening, everyone. It's Gordon Causey, as it always is, and as it always is, this is Candy the Wonder Dog, who shows up at the start of all my videos. This is how they all start. I say the same thing. This is Candy, came into the family March 18th, should have named her COVID or Corona. If you're a subscriber to my channel, you've heard it all before. She came into the family March 18th of 2020. An amazing addition. Dogs are incredible. And if you remember back to March of 2020, this gave you an excuse to leave the house when everyone was saying, stay home and stay safe. And where I live, Ontario, Canada, unless, of course, you happen to work in one of these 270, 80 industry groups, then you can go out and you can risk death. Or if you have a dog, you can go out and walk your dog. So we had actually picked her out from a breeder in February of 2020, before not knowing what the world was heading to in another month's time. But let me deal with her. What I do is I give her a treat to start my videos. She has conditioned me that that is what I have to do. So here's the treat, bacon treat, which she goes nuts for. Shake, lay down, speak. I got a good bark out of her. There we go. I gave her half of one earlier, and that was the second half. So today we are February 23rd, Sunday evening of 2025. And the big news right now going around is the election that just took place in Germany. Auf Deutschland, or aus Deutschland. My German is very poor. I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can say, ich heiße Gordon Causey. Wie geht's? How's it going? Es geht mir gut. I'm doing good. I'm doing well. Es geht mir gut. And not much else. Ich habe eine Kugelschreiber. Meine Kugelschreiber ist blau. I have a pen. My pen is blue. Doesn't come up much in real conversation. I can kleine bisschen. Sehr kleine bisschen, just a very little bit of German. The live chat is on. I'm doing this through StreamYard. I like the functionality that StreamYard provides. I'm not a paid subscriber to this software, and so you get their banners and everything all over it. And hey, small price to pay. Doesn't cost me anything to use it. The free version, and all that has to happen is they get to put their banner up, and I figure that's a fair trade. I get some increased functionality and whatever exposure they get from my I have a very small footprint in the YouTube world. 1,100 or so subscribers is really I'm a guppy. No, I haven't even reached tuna status yet, let alone sharks and whales like the Joe Rogans and Jordan Petersons and Young Turks and the rest. They have massive footprints. And you won't see live with StreamYard on their feeds, but whatever the case. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this label that has been affixed to the party that came in second in the German elections, this party that is called AfD, Alternative for Germany. Of course, Germany in German is Deutschland, so Alternative for Deutschland, German land. And they have come in second in this election. They doubled their level of support from the previous election. They went from in around 10% to up in around 20%. And there is a minority parliament that has resulted. The Bundestag is that's the parliament in Germany. It's a minority situation, meaning that no one singular party commands a majority of the legislature. And so the winner, who is from the CDU, Christian Democratic Party, the old party of Angela Merkel, They have polled close to 30%. I think the actual number is 29% of the vote that they have garnered. And so they have the largest block of seats in the parliament, the Bundestag. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that right. So I'm going to stick to English words for the most part. I shouldn't try and speak German. I don't speak it well enough. Ich spreche Französisch. I speak French. But at any rate, this label has been affixed to this Alternative for Germany party, the AfD, and they are being called extremist. You see it in all the reporting by all the mainstream legacy media outlets, the extreme right party, extreme right. And just because someone or something gets a label from the mainstream media doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. We all heard about how the deadly coronavirus, like SARS-CoV-2, was universally deadly. Didn't matter whether you were a kid, a teenager, young 20s, adult, or 80 years old and on death's doorstep already in a nursing home. It's the deadly coronavirus, and it was a universal label stuck, to scare the bejeebers out of everyone. This is what mainstream media does: sensationalistic, propagandistic. They like to take things over the top. Is that because they're propagandizing? Is that because they're trying to frame a narrative, or is that because they're just trying to sell sensationalism? I think there are elements of both, but I don't discount the fact that they are steering the population in one direction or another via propaganda. You repeat something often enough and get it embedded into the conscious minds of the media consuming public, and they just start to parrot it back mindlessly. Masks are a proven tool to mitigate viral transmission. Oh, the news said a mask is proven. It's proven. The jabs are proven to stop transmission. When you get if you get the COVID vaccines, you cannot get infected. You cannot get infected. The virus cannot infect you and then go and infect someone else. That was Rachel Maddow spreading her misinformation all over MSNBC and to their millions. I can't believe that but they probably do still have, 2 or 3 million people who watch that. Mind you, that's a drop in the bucket in a nation of 340, 350 million, which is what the United States is right now. But anyway, so the mainstream media is calling the AfD an extreme right party. And I'm going to ask viewers, so I'm going to ask anyone paying attention to my stream to question that, to just be introspective and say, is that genuinely the case? Why are they being labeled extreme right rather than just right? The CDU party, led by Friedrich Merz, who is widely anticipated to be the next chancellor of Germany, equivalent to a Canadian prime minister, that they are considered center right. So what is it that has the mainstream legacy media painting this AfD as extreme right? And I'm going to argue that the primary reason is because of their stance on immigration. There have been a number of incidents in Germany involving immigrants from Afghanistan, from Saudi Arabia, engaged in what some might frame as terrorist style attacks, driving a car, a la what we saw down in New Orleans on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, when that, in the case of New Orleans, it was an American citizen, but was an American citizen, or is an American citizen who is an adherent to the Islamic faith. And in the case of the Afghan individual who I believe drove his car and killed a mother and her young child, and then injured Several other people, some severely, was an immigrant from Afghanistan, likewise Islamic, Muslim. And, this gets difficult because I'm well aware of the fact that anyone who says anything untoward, anything negative about, and is a person who professes the Islamic faith, you are going to be automatically labeled an Islamophobe. I love this word phobe. Stick it on the internet, everything. You're a homophobe, afraid of homosexuals. You're transphobic. You're afraid of people who are suffering from gender confusion. Don't know whether they're boy or girl, man or woman. Everything's a phobia now. And there are a lot of people out there who are genuinely afraid to have that kind of pejorative label stuck on them. I'm not, and so a lot of people just keep their mouths shut. I'm not built that way. I don't mind. I'm willing to step out on the ice, to use a Canadian analogy, and test and risk getting us what we would call in Canada soaker, where your foot falls through the ice and you get your foot all wet. Hopefully, I don't fall through and drown, but willing to risk that as well. Because to have meaningful conversations, to have meaningful dialogue, you have to be willing to take risks. And when the powers that be, for lack of a better expression, don't want certain things discussed, they don't want certain things talked about, like immigration, then they affix all these negative labels onto you and call you a transphobe, homophobe, racist, etc., 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 which I repudiate all those things. But whatever the case, I do have a couple people watching. There are some people watching, so if you want to fill up the live stream, I'd be very interested to know what others are thinking with respect to these results and about AFD being labeled extreme right. In Canada, I'm a Canadian. For those who may not be aware, I live in Northumberland County, Ontario, which is in southeastern Ontario. It is a very rural part of the province. However, most of my life I have spent growing up in or around large urban centers. And I find there's very much um, a difference of outlook amongst those who live in the large urban centers or in close proximity, and those like myself who live out in the boondocks. And if you look at Toronto, which I live about an hour and a half east of Toronto, and I go to Toronto regularly, and I did spend a long time growing up there, living there. I've lived downtown, lived right on the subway line. And Toronto is an incredibly cosmopolitan city, and it's a wonderful city. And it's a wonderful city because it's a cosmopolitan city. We haven't yet seen the degree of problems that we've been seeing in and across Europe, problems that are popping up in places like Germany, Sweden, France, and certainly Great Britain, where there has been a large influx of individuals from I'm just going to say the Islamic world, coming from majority Islamic countries. And I do genuinely have my radar up. I am genuinely concerned about the erosion of traditional Western democratic values. I'm also a professing Christian, and I see Islam and Christianity to be very much at odds. Christianity, most will know, Jesus is referred to many names, wonderful counselor, Emmanuel, Prince of Peace. And he taught his disciples and those who followed him that when you're hit upon one cheek, offer up the other one also. If someone asks you to go a mile, go two. Give to everyone who takes from you. It's not the message of this world, and it is certainly not the message of Islam. Islam, like Judaism, has this concept of take an eye for an eye and take a tooth for a tooth. And men far smarter than I have said that when you take an eye for an eye, the whole world goes blind. And when you fight fire with fire, all you get is more fire. So, but is it unreasonable? Is it extreme right for a country to want to control its level of immigration from places, from societies that are dominated by an ideology that is at counter purposes to Western democratic values? And I do not, for one, think it is unreasonable to limit immigration from places like the aforementioned Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or the Middle East or anywhere where the Islamic mindset, the Islamic ideology, the Islamic religion takes center stage. I see it very much as something of a Trojan horse. We all know about, most will be aware of Sharia law. Sharia law that stipulates, which is something that is enforced in countries like Iran, where women are not allowed to leave the house unless they're escorted by a male family member, where their face must be covered. I forget the name of the face covering. It's either the hijab or the niqab. I think it's the niqab, the one that covers the face except for the eyes. Then, of course, I do know the burqa. The burqa is what covers a woman from head to toe, with just the only thing you see is the eyes. Everything else, it's like being under a sheet. And is that something we want to see in our day-to-day lives in the West? And it must also be remembered that Islam is very much a proselytizing, I hate that word because it's so difficult to pronounce, but it basically means evangelizing. Islam is a very evangelical faith. They are seeking converts. And Islam has a history, like Christianity, sadly, of, call it, converting at the point of a sword, convert or die. Christians have done that in past history. Islam has done it in past history. And if you look at groups like ISIS or Daesh, Islamic State, they continue to do it. There is one key differentiator, though, in my mind, and that is that Christians, by and large, overwhelmingly, will recognize that things like the Spanish Inquisition and the manner in which indigenous populations were treated in places like my own nation of Canada, where we had the residential schools, that the treatment that the church meted out on non-adherence to the Christian faith, we recognize it as evil and we call it out and we repudiate it. Within the Islamic faith, I don't see that. I see the Islamic faith as saying, as justifying it as being the right thing to do before Allah, which is simply Allah, or Allah is simply the Arabic rendering of the word God. It's just a word. And I'm not, you know, just because Arabic, you know, in French you say Dieu. Doesn't mean the French worship a different God named Dieu. It's just the French language. If an Arabic-speaking individual converts to Christianity and praises Jesus and God and does it in his native Arabic language, he will use the word Allah or Allah. Not, my Arabic is even worse than my German. Can't believe there are no thoughts going up. But I wanted to share something about why I think we see the media doing this, why they are labeling this AFD. And in Canada, we saw the same thing with the People's Party of Canada. It's labeled equally as extreme right because of their stance against what Maxime Bernier in Canada has referred to as mass migration or mass immigration. And it has to do with marketing. It has to do with defining and sticking labels on things. And I have a bit of an analogy to tell. When I was 12 years old, we moved to a new town. When I was 11, turning 12. And I'm an 11 turning 12-year-old heading into grade 7. I have no friends. I'm new to the neighborhood, just moved in. We'd actually moved back to Canada from the United States. And this is a story I've mentioned before on my channel, but not for a long time. And immediately, when you're that age, when you're a kid, when you're 11, 12 years old, 13, you're looking around for friends. And if you see someone your same age and the same gender, and there are only two, boys and girls, you gravitate toward one another and you test each other out, and hey, looks like we're friends. Looks like we can hang out together. And that happened immediately. I became friends with a guy who lived kitty corner to me. And as we're developing our friendship, he told me, you want to stay away from Steve down the road. Steve's a bad guy. He started to define Steve for me. Said, Steve's a bad guy. This is in the 1970s, so we're going back a few years. I'm 58 years of age now, born in 1966. So he told me, you want to stay away from that guy, Steve. His parents are divorced. He's been in trouble. He got picked up for shoplifting. He's bad guy, bad guy. Okay. I don't know Steve. So if this other guy's telling me he's a bad guy, divorced, coming from a broken home, he's had trouble with the law, well, he painted a negative picture of Steve. Of course, later on, I got to know Steve. And Steve was one of my best friends all the way through high school. Turned out that Steve and we got along fantastic. My dad, particularly, liked Steve a lot because my dad had come from a broken home. His parents had divorced. And so I bring this up just to point out that why do they not want the AFD rising? We have groups like the World Economic Forum, of which Friedrich Merz has the man who is going to be the new chancellor, 99% likelihood that Friedrich Merz and his CDU party is going to form the government in coalition with one or two other small fringe parties. But all the parties in the Bundestag, in this parliament building, have said that they're putting up a firewall between themselves and that extreme right AFD party. Don't have anything to do with that AFD party. Remember my analogy. Don't have anything to do with that guy named Steve. And it's annoying. I find it annoying when that is done. Let the voters, let citizens judge a party, judge its leadership, judge its platform on its own merits, rather than sticking these labels, these pejorative, negative labels to try and steer people away. Don't want to become friends with that guy, Steve. You don't want to cozy up to that AFD. Now, for what it is worth, I have done some reading, and there are individuals within this AFD party who reportedly, from what I've been able to gather, have made some pretty bombastic claims, such as that German citizenship should only be extended to those who are, I think, genetically German, and that's problematic. That can be incredibly problematic, and it certainly has definitive racist overtones. But does that mean everyone in the party is like that? And this is the difficulty. The media loves to play the game of guilt by association. Citizens of Canada will be very familiar with the trucker convoy that happened in our capital city back in February, March of 2022, when truckers, I think in the thousands of truckers, descended upon the city of Ottawa. And the media went out and they were scouring, looking for anything that could be painted as a racist symbol, like the Confederate flag. I saw pictures of a pickup truck that had the Confederate flag on it. There, this proves everyone attached to this trucker convoy is a racist. And it's like, are Canadians really that brain dead that they're going to go along with the media and play guilt by association? On the weekends, the numbers of protesters swelling the streets of Ottawa and Parliament Hill was in the tens, if not 100,000 plus people. And you find one Confederate flag, one individual with a Nazi flag, and you're going to conflate that to everybody or the majority? Please. That was grotesque what our media did, but they were so hell bent on framing the narrative of these protesters who were standing up for for the rule of law, for our Constitution, for our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, for basic human rights, the right to say no to a medical intervention. If you don't want to take it, the principle of informed consent, standing up for these Canadian values, and they were smeared, maligned. The government closed individuals' bank accounts, shut down their access to their finances so that they couldn't pay their bills. This is the world we're in, and this is the world that was not, the media did not frame that as extremist. They should have. It would have been an accurate depiction to say that the extremist dictatorial style rule of Justin Trudeau is making Canada look more like the old Soviet Union than a Western democratic liberal democracy. They should have said that, but they did not. They tried to paint Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh and all those going along with the insanity as being the reasonable ones, and anyone who was standing up for the Constitution, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the principle of informed consent, well, they were the radicals. This is the kind of world we have devolved into. And I do not think it is unreasonable for German citizens looking at all the incidents that they've seen involving individuals of the Islamic faith recently immigrated into the country, engaging in acts that could be defined as potentially terrorist style acts, terrorist style atrocities being perpetrated on the people of Germany, and to reasonably expect the government to do something to address the level of immigration, especially when it's coming from countries where religious or ideological worldviews do not align with the ideological worldviews, religious views of the majority of German citizens. Is that an unreasonable proposition to put forward? I do not think it is. Maybe some, now I'm an old white guy. I tick all the boxes. I say this often. Cancel culture is alive and well in Canada. We do not have Donald Trump and his free speech advocacy. We have cancel culture here. Critical race theory is still the flavor of the month. We still, in this country, do not acknowledge the basic fundamental fabric of reality that says there are men and there are women, there are boys and girls, there's XXXY. This country doesn't recognize reality, feelings in my native Canada, Trump, objective reality. Bit of an unfortunate word to use, Trump, but it is what it is. Anyway, those were just some thoughts I wanted to put out there. I'm saddened that I didn't get any engagement. I wonder if I'm going to try something just to see. I'm viewing this on StreamYard right now, but on YouTube, I've got to put it, and I got to check something. And I'm going to see if I can. Okay. I now have it up both on YouTube and on StreamYard. And according to YouTube, I have 3 viewers watching, according to StreamYard, 4, but no one's commenting. And I wonder to what degree that may be that people, do I want to comment on a video such as this, on a topic so sensitive as this? Do I want to be maligned as a member of the alt extreme right? I do not consider myself alternative extreme right by any stretch of the imagination. I consider it curious that when you look at, I'm just going to talk about, I can't speak to Germany, I've never been there, and my German language skills are very rudimentary, as I demonstrated at the beginning. Eat Me, who is, she's from Montreal, Montréalaise, un langage que je parle, pas comme allemande, not like German, I do speak French, but, and even my French is not perfect, but I'm conversant. I have a reasonably high degree of or fluency in the French language. German, none. But at any rate, she just wrote, just came in, comment, imploring anyone else, the other people here, throw in some comments. But I was going to say that I can I can only speak within a Canadian context. And 1978, when we moved back to Canada permanently, I spent 10 years growing up in the United States. I'm a Canadian born. I'm Canadian born in Canada. But when I was about 6 months old, we moved to New York. Later, we spent some time in New Jersey, Portland, Oregon, and um, with went back and forth a few times. And but the majority of my growing up until the age of 12 was spent in the United States. But in terms of Canada, I finished grade 4, did all of grade 5 in Burlington, Ontario, which is on the western side of Toronto. And I remember my class, the grade 4 class and the grade 5 class I was in, and I do not recall one student who was not white. It was lily white. This would have been 1975, 1976, lily white school. When we moved back to Canada permanently in 1978, so way back in the 70s, the immigration was just beginning to liberalize. We were just beginning to open things up. And initially, that opening up involved countries that were within the British Commonwealth, countries like Jamaica or India or Sri Lanka, countries that were in the Commonwealth. There was no real Islamic influence, no real Islamic presence in Canada, in the Canada that I grew up in. Hank Holiday has shown up. My Sunday was fantastic. Went to church, heard a wonderful sermon by the youth pastor. We had a holiday last week. The Monday is a holiday. It's called Family Day. And it's a statutory holiday. And the plan was last Sunday to have a family service where no kids' church, everyone in the main sanctuary, families together, family day. But then we got inundated. We got hit with a snowstorm that probably dumped in around 20, 25, maybe 30 inches, 40 to 50 centimeters of snow. Whomp came down. And so church was canceled. So they simply moved the service forward. So we had a wonderful service today, and incredibly, I love the church I'm going to. I love the congregation. It's about as diverse as you can imagine in an area like this that is still predominantly white. It's still predominantly, European descended Canadians. But at this church, we've got a lot of people from the Caribbean, from the Philippines. A lot of people from, there's a family who are Haitian but grew up in France, and get a great chance to keep my French working, talking to that family. Anyway, I did have a good day. But anyway, the point I was getting at was it was in the late 70s that Canada began to open up its immigration policies. In previous generations, like if you went back into the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, Canadian immigration was very restrictive. We targeted Great Britain and Western Europe, the Netherlands, Eastern Europe, certainly, Ukraine, Lithuania, Estonia, the Baltic states, because Canada had a lot of undeveloped farmland. We wanted to increase our farming capacity. So we went to countries like the Netherlands and the Baltic states and Ukraine, where people had were experienced farmers, brought them over. And in the case of Manitoba in particular, and maybe Saskatchewan as well, a lot of Ukrainians came and they were given substantial tracts of land to farm with the stipulation that they would have ownership of the land provided they established and maintained permanent residence on the land. And the Ukrainian farmers built what they called soddies. They built houses out of sod. They would take, I mean, it's almost like watching the Ten Commandments or reading the book of Exodus and making bricks out of mud and straw. That's what they did. They made bricks out of sod mixed with straw and hay, and they would make a house out of dirt. They called them sod huts or soddies. And but we had this and it was decidedly a racist. We wanted white immigrants coming in to Canada. It wasn't until the 1970s, 80s that first it was opened up to members of the Commonwealth. And then within the last 10 or so years, the gates have really been opened up to the entire world. And we have guys like Canada's current, and for a very short time going forward, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's slated to leave on March 9th, 10th, right around March 9th. He's brought in this notion of post-nationalism where you're a citizen of the planet Earth, and turning a blind eye to the fact that there are deep and distinct cultural, religious, and ideological differences between populations. And when you leave a wide open door to a group of people who have an ideology, a culture, religious views that run counter to the existing culture, it's a recipe for conflict, and it's a recipe for discord and destabilization. And that is what we are seeing. Just ask Native First Nations Canadians what it's like when large numbers of individuals come in with a cultural world religious view that's different from your own. And look what happened to our First Nations people. And we're now doing the same thing. And it's human nature. Sadly, it's human nature. The human beings subjugate each other. And it doesn't matter how much melanin is in the skin. Doesn't matter what religious group you are. Doesn't matter your culture. If one population has the capacity to subjugate a different people, if they have the capacity to do it, every time throughout human history it happens. Even in North America, before European settlers came over, the First Nations tribes of the Americas were at war with one another. The Mohawks and the Iroquois and the Cree, and out west the Sioux and the Pawnee, and down south the Cherokee. These nations were at war with each other. The winner would enslave the losers. They'd either kill everyone or enslave. And this is just our broken, fallen human condition. And it's universal, irrespective of race. Eat Me is writing, Gordon, depends where you were in the 70s. We had Italian immigrants, Irish lots of Vietnamese migrants, but we had a thing in common, Christianity. You wouldn't have Christianity in common with the Vietnamese, typically speaking. The Vietnamese, and Canada did open its doors to the Vietnamese boat people after the Vietnam War. And the Vietnamese would have been largely, I imagine, Buddhist would be the primary religion, or if they happen to be from North Vietnam, where it was communist, then in classic Marxism, religion, any religion, is considered the opiate of the masses. And but when you talk about Irish, um, Greek, Italian, Portuguese, we're talking about basically Western Europe. And it wasn't until when I was living in New Jersey, I spent 4.5, 5 years growing up in New Jersey. The school I went to, we had one Vietnamese student. I can't remember her name, but we had one girl who had left Vietnam. Her family had left Vietnam. We had a very, the school I went to, Eat Me's writing that Buddhist is peaceful, nothing to stir the pot. I don't know a lot about Buddhism. All I know, the only real precept I know that Buddhism has is that the desire, the wanting, just desire, wanting anything, whether it be position or possessions, any desire to attain things, that is the root of all unhappiness. And I think there is some truth to that. I don't think Christianity, my faith, has a monopoly on the truth. I don't think, I don't look at even Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism or whatever ism. Many, probably all of them have at least some elements of truth to them. The notion of do unto others as you would have them do unto you is expressed in just about all the world's major faiths. In Hinduism, I think it's called karma. What goes around comes around. And in Christianity, we express it as what you reap, as you reap, so shall ye sow. You reap what you sow. What you put into the ground, that's what grows up. Anyway, and there's not been a lot of discussion on this. I'll leave this video out there and see if it generates any commentary afterward. So down below, there's a comment field. Fill it up. If you think I'm a racist, if you take exception to anything that I have said, have at it. I don't mind. I've got big shoulders. You go nuts. If you agree with me, great. Write that as well. I love commentary. It'll be interesting to see what happens. This Friedrich Merz is an interesting character. I don't know much about him except for the fact that he was on the board of directors with, are you ready for this? BlackRock. That's thrilling when you talk about this globalist agenda, this Agenda 2030 crowd and the Great Reset. He's also, I'm planning to watch just about a month ago. He sat down and gave an interview in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And just because someone speaks at the World Economic Forum, I'm not going to necessarily put them in that camp. I've got to hear what he has to say. But it strikes me this affiliation that he had as chairman of the supervisory board with BlackRock. I had to write that down. So BlackRock, you talk about everyone's now talking about echoing because of Elon Musk. They're saying, oh, oligarchs, we got to watch out for the oligarchs. Well, if you're worried about oligarchs, then worry about BlackRock. Many will remember the fact that the kid who shot Donald Trump, or at least the one who's believed to the kid who died on the rooftop outside of Butler, Pennsylvania. I can't even remember this kid's name. It's amazing. Leah Harvey Oswald, that's, embedded in the brain. John Wilkes Booth, that's embedded in the brain. James Earl Ray, the guy who shot MLK, that's embedded in the brain. Even John Hinckley Jr., the guy who shot Ronald Reagan. I remember all these names. Crooks, I think, was this kid's name who was on the roof and he shot. He was in a commercial for BlackRock. And there was another connection to BlackRock that came out in and around the same time. And you talk about this globalist World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030, this UN alliance between the WEF and the United Nations, how they've aligned themselves and are pushing the world in a certain direction. And you get parties like the AFD who are maybe willing to push back against it, and they get labeled pejoratively as, extreme right. And how fair is that? Is it because they don't want people pushing back against this post-nationalist world that they're trying to usher in? Where I'll tell you something, this post-nationalist world that they want to usher in, and it's still in the cards, they're still moving in this direction of wanting everyone living in 15-minute cities. You think post-nationalist, you're going to be ultra-nationalist, you're going to be stuck into a 15-minute city if they get their way, where you're not allowed to leave your little enclave, except for maybe 2 or 3 times a year, constantly under the watchful eye of Big Brother. This world is getting scary. And the ability with AI and technology and the surveillance state and their ability to manipulate and ring the bell, that Pavlovian bell, to get us salivating, it's going to be harder and harder, I believe, to navigate this world. And that's where I'll end off by bringing my faith into it, my Christian faith into it. If you're going to navigate this world, if you're going to navigate the lies that are being foisted on us, and remember who the liar was from the beginning and the father of all lies, and you look at all the lies being promulgated on the nightly news and by our elected officials, even by medical health officials, have been caught lying, like Anthony Fauci, caught lying. The science says. Where was the science behind social distancing? Well, there wasn't. We never did any science. We never did any randomized controlled trials, no clinical trials, no nothing. Just yank it out of your nether regions. Pardon me for swearing, but let's just pull something out of our ass is basically what it amounts to. And again, I apologize for the swearing, but I don't think that using the term ass is going to damn me to hell. I've got far worse things that need to be forgiven than that. And that's why I need an advocate. That's why I need the blood of the Lamb. That's why I need Jesus Christ. So, crazy world. I hope everyone had a good Sunday. Let me know what you think to Eat Me and Hank Holiday and others who are my regular subscribers. I would appreciate you giving me some commentary feedback on whether you prefer me to be on just regular old YouTube or if you prefer me using this StreamYard. What I like about this is I can take someone's comment like Eat Me's here and I can show it. And it shows up on the screen. Or Hank, when he asked me how was my Sunday, and it was great. So at any rate, this is the way I like to end my videos. Eat Me and Hank will know this. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. And as I always say, he will. The offer is there. You just have to accept it. And the hardest part of it is submission. In our world, we're conditioned to view submission as a bad thing. But when you're submitting to the maker of all things, the creator of this universe, the creator of the fabric of reality, it's not a bad thing. You're just submitting to reality. So anyway, I'll leave you there and we'll talk to you all Probably tomorrow night. We will see. There's going to be something happening in the world, I have no doubt. Uh, I like what Emi writes. Emi wrote in terms of the platform, StreamYard, YouTube by itself. Whatever rocks your boat, platform wise, go for it. Anyway, God bless. Talk to you all soon. Ending off. Night.